What's up, everybody? Scott here from Chernobyl Studios, and it has been a minute since I have looked at some drum library stuff. So here we are. We're looking at the Punk and Grind library from Ugritone Drums. Before we get started with this, let's just have a listen what this thing sounds like in a mix. All right, there we go. That's what it sounds like in the context of a mix. Now, Ugritone are a very interesting company because they have a philosophy of not really messing with the drum shells and cymbals that much. What does that mean? That means that instead of always trying to get the best process type of sounding, get everything perfect and all these other things, Ugritone captures what drums tend to sound like, in a room, which usually is a boxy, you know, uninspiring mess sometimes, especially depending on the type of drums being played. Now, the interesting thing about these particular drums are that all these toms are QuikTubes. In other words, the toms are cardboard. Now, if you've ever done any type of construction work, for example, pouring concrete or anything like that, you might know what these QuikTubes are. And QuikTubes are literally what they sound like. They're circular cardboard. I don't want to call it a box, but they're a circular cardboard shape. You dig a hole, you put them in there, and you pour concrete into them, and you're usually creating concrete pillars, which will usually be some kind of support. I poured a bunch of these, in my teenage years when we're, doing supports for decks and all these things. So you dig that thing 3, 4, 6 feet deep. You throw the quick tube in there, you pour some concrete, and boom, that's what shapes the pillar. Now, so it's very interesting that Ron and the guys at Ugritone had the idea to basically create toms out of quick tubes. But the funny thing is, they sound pretty good. They sound quite good. So here's what they sound like. Of course, this is with all the mix processing and stuff and the reverb that I have on there, but really, that's not bad at all. I mean, they have the snappiness and the attack, which usually, if you're working with real drums, can be a super pain in the ass to try and get because when a drummer is playing, especially when they're playing quickly, and I've talked about this extensively in my metal drum programming mastery training series. When you're playing quickly on the toms, you're usually not getting the attack from playing fast. So you might get some buzzing and stuff like that. But these things are snappy as hell. Okay, snare, kick, and we have a range of cymbals, that you would expect already from Ugritone. And I just was really, really impressed with how this thing sounded. So I wanted to do a demo and I wanted to share it with you guys. Now, a couple things here I want to talk about, things that might have changed. I don't remember when the last Ugritone video I did was. They have created this Ugritone drums. I guess I'll call it a sampler, but this is basically the new and updated sampler where all of the other drums are inside of. So if I come down here to my presets, these are all the other different drum libraries that they have come up with. So everything is now in one central location. You don't have to install many different versions, and they've got that sorted out finally, which is quite nice because it was a bit confusing there, over the summer. Like, how do I install this? What do I do here? So now what you do is we just have the Ugritone drums platform with all of their drums inside here. So it's really easy to get to. So obviously I'm using the Punk and Grind, and I just used Grindy Default, I think. No, I used Nasty Grind, okay. And then I changed the snare from the Popcorn 10-inch. I changed it to the Pork Pie, and I didn't do anything else. Okay, so we're hearing it with a bunch of processing. Let's turn the processing off. For example, let's turn everything off. I'll leave the limiter on the drums. Let's just do this. It'll be faster. So we'll just turn everything off for the drums here. Really impressed. So and that's pretty good. You know, and the great thing I love about Ugritone is because their samples are unique sounding and their libraries are unique sounding, you're not gonna automatically be like, ah, that's Toontrack. But you know, with a little bit of EQ and reverb, those toms are starting to sound pretty convincing. Let me just show you what I did here. So I did do a multiple out routing, and I really recommend doing that with Ugritone stuff. Now, I would not recommend to do the mega mix. There's no reason for that. You can if you want, but the way that they have things set up in the UI here is you can do a lot of mixing here in the UI. For example, if you want to turn, you know, the crash up, you can just come down here to the master gain and turn it up. Okay, so I don't really see the necessity to put everything on its single channel. So what I typically will do is I will do the shells 1 through 7, cymbals on 8, and then room on 9. This acts pretty convincingly like, you know, you would have mic'd up a real drum set, and then so you're still working in that particular fashion. But if you realize, oh, you know, the China's not loud enough, or the China's too loud, you could come here to the master gain in the mix tab and turn it down. Same thing, you know, with the effects and routing, we can do all this individually for each individual track. So I still have the flexibility if I want to change one specific aspect of the kit without really having to, scrape my knuckles or anything like that. It's not a big deal. If you haven't seen the rest of this UI before, basically we got a bunch of different tabs down here. So this tab here shows all of the different pop-up windows for every single instrument. This one closes them all. This one, you're flipping through the different views between routing, mix, and effects. And these are global buttons. So if you want to look at the effects tab of all of the instruments on the kit, here you go. Or all the mix elements, here you go. Same thing with routing. It's all right here. And you can select any routing that you want. It's great, really. I mean, it's super flexible, anything that you want to do. And if you're not sure what the routing is, we can come down here to the MIDI button, and we will get a matrix view of all of the routing options. And to change it, it's just a matter of clicking. And it's really cool because if you click and you have a conflict, it's going to tell you, hey, there's a conflict here. You should, change that. Now I just used General MIDI Standard, so I can come back here, and there we go. Everything's back like normal, no big deal. But you can put the routing. You can put the MIDI mapping however you want, and it's very easy to see. It's really easy. It's quite nice actually. Not a pain in the ass at all. We can invert the panning, left-right invert with one click of the button. Something that's new also is we've got a master mixer in here. We can do reverb, saturation, delay, as well as humanize by a lot or by a little, change the overall master game. Things are a little bit too hot. I really like how Ugritone has grown over the years because, I mean, the very first video I did for Ugritone, it was the Cult Drums version 1 in the Contact platform, and it was pretty raw, if I put it like that. So it's quite nice to see them getting, not I want to say more technical, but the UIs are becoming easier to manage. There's a lot of things that musically make sense that you would want to do with the plugin, things like that. So it's really quite nice. I'm quite impressed. Then we have the settings over here, load, browse. I mean, everything that you would, it's all self-explanatory, which is what I really like about Ugritone. You don't really have to try to figure it out what's going on here. But let's get now back to the samples, because that's what this is all about. Punk and grind. So I realized that my example was probably too polished for many people's taste, because it's, the guitar playing is too good for it to be punk, and maybe the mix is too clean for it to be grind. Who fucking knows? I don't care. But all I wanted to show was that the drums sound amazing. Now, if we solo these, let's go ahead and get the effects going. So even with the processing, they still sound quite natural. And listen, the processing, it's all basic stuff. I haven't done anything here that I wouldn't do with any other drum kit. Again, it's still a sample drum library, so you're still able to not have to deal with erroneous recording things like hi-hat bleed and stuff like that. But these samples are a bit more raw and organic than what you might be used to doing. So you can see here my kick. I've really dug out the kick quite a bit here. I wouldn't typically do this with a tune track kit, for example, because it's pretty much 95% of the way there. I might do a little bit of a dip, but here I am very seriously EQing and digging things out. I can show you the difference here. Let's go. Okay, just making it more metal. This is a classic EQ. This is a pretty classic EQ for a drum, for a kick drum. Getting rid of low mids, so the bass guitar and the snare and the rhythm guitars can kind of occupy this space. Scooping it, adding some 5K for click, getting rid of some, just usually there's some kind of honky or basketball-esque type frequencies in this area that you want to check. It's not in every it's not in every kick drum, so you can't just arbitrarily nuke this area. Okay, and you really want to check this area as well. You have a lot of information in this area. You get to mask the bass guitar, and that is a number one way to make sure your mix is muddy and unintelligible. So you need to take care of the kick and sculpt it accordingly. Now the snare is pretty interesting. Snares, we always have the same problem with snares in that they're annoying. It's hard to get a nice sound from them. So the first thing I noticed was it has this, especially during the blast beats, there is a resonance doing, 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 doing. And it seems to be in this area right here. Now, I am sort of against the theory of just nuke it out. I try to do EQ to where it's all right. If you hear it and you know it's there, you're still going to hear it, but it's not going to be the most dominating thing that you're going to hear with the snare drum. So let's turn all the processing off. Doing, 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 doing. It's just a constant ring, and it's annoying. So let's go through the EQ that I did here. So just thinning it out a little bit, taking care of the first resonance ring that I really disliked. But then there's that just ding 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 ding, just pumping away over there. So we got to get rid of it with this EQ. It's still there, but I don't want to say muted. It's just muted a little bit, so it's not going to be the first thing you're going to hear when you hear the snare drum. Now, one thing I do normally do with Ugritone drums is I do compress them. I do a little bit more of compression than I normally would because I know Ron samples the drums pretty dryly and pretty raw. There's not a lot of processing going on before the product is released. A lot of it just has to do with getting the samples, clipping them right, and getting them working well with the algorithm and stuff like that. So you still need to do some compression. Stuff you probably would not do working with a different drum library, but that's the great thing about Ugritone is they're pretty raw. It's like you're standing in the room with the drum kit. That's how it sounds. So compression is a bit necessary. Now, because of the scooping, I shall say, I'm doing around 400 or 500. I like to bump the 200 to add some more depth and weight back into the snare. So you can just hear how the weight, or you can hear how the snare just sounds thin, like a feather. There's no impact, there's no power until we put the EQ back in. Okay, so a lot of that power is coming from this boost right here at 200. And then we are again cutting a little bit around the 700 range here at 700. Again, just kind of to cut down on the cardboardy aspect of the snare. Okay, and the compressor here, I'm not doing anything too crazy. 4 to 1 ratio, pretty standard stuff. quick release, quick attack, and just threshold until I like the way it sounded. You always got to be careful because we're alternating between hard skank beat hits and a blast beat, so we have to find the best of both worlds. If you wanted to get really crazy with it, you could separate the snare into two different tracks. So you'd have the blast beat track, and then you'd have the skank track, and then you could have different compressor settings for them, or you can automate compressor settings, which good luck with that shit. I would probably do the double snare track trick. But it's an extra layer, extra pain in the ass, especially when you're working with a drum library, because that means you have to bounce out the snare, then you have to duplicate it, put it on different tracks, edit out each part accordingly, and then you could do the compressor settings. But there you go, that's how you could do it. Just trying to get a little bit of extra power and snap from the snare. That's all. So the compressor helps enunciate this boost that we've done here, really giving it the smack, the attack, and the power and the depth, that a snare like this needs. Now the toms. The toms are very interesting. So let's go ahead here. Where are we? Where's that big tom fill? Right here. Let's have a look-see. So the toms are pretty amazing sounding. Now, there's nothing crazy, guys. It's the same exact thing. The tom EQ in metal is always an exaggerated smiley face like this. You take out the low end, you just dig out a bunch of the mids, upper mids sometimes if they sound papery and a little cardboardy. And then I personally like to add attack around 4 to 5K, so I get the slick type of sound on the tom. And the cardboard QuikTubes just took to this EQ method quite nicely. And the EQ method is exactly the same for every single tom. Obviously, they are EQ'd differently because they're different frequencies and tuned differently, but the approach is exactly the same. Take out the mids, upper mids if necessary, and boost the highs. Now, one thing that you want to do when you're boosting the highs, you can see that not every so this is 5.7 at 4.6. This is 5.1 at 4. So they're not all boosted at the exact same frequency. So a trick that you can do, because you want to make sure that the toms sound like they belong in the same drum kit, right? You don't want to have one tom EQ'd with a really high, boost, and then the next tom is dead sounding in comparison. So what you can do is when you have the first initial tom that you like, for example, it's like here's my tom, and you go, okay, I like that. What you want to do, or what I tend to do, is I like to create a loop. So I'll create a loop like this. Awesome. Now, let's take this EQ off here. And here we are. So you would run into a situation like this. That's what I mean where the toms don't sound like they belong to the same drum kit. So what I do is I'll have this playing. I'll have both toms playing, and then I'll do my EQ move. So I might just, I'll start with my filters. Then I'll do some low mids. I'm like, okay, we got lows here, low mids. And I do the EQ with them playing together so I can reference each one. There we go. Now the two toms sound like they belong in the same drum kit. So that's something that you can do if you're working on toms and you sometimes run into the situation where you have the one tom sounding awesome. You move on to the next tom and it's like, yeah, is this even the same thing? All right, so that's what you can do for that. All the toms are going to a tom's bus. Let's make this all the way. Okay, and then we are slapping these through a compressor and another bit of EQ. So once again, just doing more of the same 500, which is Kristen Kola correctly mentioned. 500 is the enemy of metal drums, and real drums will have a truckload of this frequency, especially the toms. So when you're working with real toms or libraries like Ugritone that don't really process the toms, you're going to do a lot of work on them. So I'm doing 4 dB reduction at 500 with this on the bus after I've done a 8 dB of the same thing here with the kvlt. But you can hear the difference, right? So we have the EQ off. Turn the EQ on. There you go. Now it starts to sound like what we would expect to hear from a metal tom. Same thing here. I'm doing another low cut around 50, just to get rid of any extra frequencies that I may have added with boosting. And then that's it. I'm boosting 5K once again, very soft. And then compressor, man, compressor. Same kind of thing I did with the snare. 4-to-1, fast release, fast attack, and just adjusting the threshold until I liked how the sound of the toms were. Like I was waiting for them to start sounding thick. I didn't really have to worry about trying to get more snap and attack out of it because the toms already sounded like that. I just wanted to get them sounding more thick. So that's how I did that with the toms. Now, cymbals, I just treated them like they're overheads. They don't have any shells in them, so I really took care of the low end. Got rid of it and dealt with some nasty frequencies here and there. The rooms, dealt with them like a real drum room. What I would do with drum rooms anyway. I put double lock on there, Pro Q. So here we go. So when you got the room here, so with drums are very interesting because you might take care of that room boxiness issue in the tom track, but then you have the room track where it's the exact same problem. Now that's just inherent to recording drums and how drums sound, so it's always going to be like that. So the whole point of using the room is to try to add vibe and ambience into this particular drums, into drums in general. So I clean it up with the EQ. All right, and then I like to use a preset on double lock, which is Drum Giant Sizer. Okay, and it just makes the drum sound wider and bigger. And I have the mix pretty low, and then I'll bring the fader down about 5 or 6 dB all the time as well. I'm just gonna use the drums for like a vibe check, right? Now the cymbals are pretty harsh in general, in my opinion, and they're very sibilant type, if you want to say it like that. So Soothe 2 to the rescue, drum room harsh, set the depth till it sounds cool, done. Soothe is just one of those plugins where at this point in time, yes, it's good to have. One of those things I would highly recommend investing in because it works for many different applications. Because a problem like this, where the rooms where the cymbals would be sounding harsh like that, you might have to do EQ, you might have to do dynamic EQ, use a multi-band compressor, maybe throw a de-esser on there. You'd have to try all these things to find the way that worked the best. Or you can just use Soothe, so there's that. All right, bass is nothing special. I think I'm just using, Euro bass here. Classic thing here, EQ, microshift, limiter, blah, blah, blah. Rhythm guitars, I went with the NTS, which, I don't know, it's okay, sounds cool. I'm using my guitar in drop A with Seymour Duncan Invaders in it. The chain is the same as it's always been. EQ, multiband, the API, Soothe 2, and then this time I used I don't know why, but I just went with Renaissance Axe. Don't know why, I was just like, fuck it, it's cool, let's use that. So whatever, and then this is the result we're getting here. I will mention that I'm using a plate, just using the literal default plate that loads with this. And then I'm using CLA Room with this. I'm sending everything to the room, different levels. I mean, and then my submix and my master chain are exactly the same. If you've been in any of my courses, you know what they are. So if we press play, and we're pretty good to go. And I love using this dust analyzer. It's free. I don't remember where to get it from, but Dust Analyzer is my go-to because I know that I'm pretty much looking to have 60 hertz around minus 20 dB. And that's pretty much my eyeball test. So when the drums are playing, I'm looking for low end to be in this area, just like in this little quadrant right here. And that's pretty much it. So the Ugritone drums, punk and grind, it's a very simple library. What you see is what you get, but it's great. I definitely could recommend this if you want to do like just straight up punk with no frills. I mean, I understand that I did my mixing techniques. I made it sound really nice and etc. 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 Not supposed to sound like that. It's supposed to be punk and grind. Yeah. Well, whatever. I just wanted to present the instrument in the best way that I could because I really like this one. Grind sounds fantastic. We have a bunch of different presets down here, which I'm not going to go through because it's going to mess up the entire mix. But you should know by now, Ron from Ugritone has a great ear when it comes to creating presets for different genres and different types. He's usually quite spot on. You don't really need to do anything. Like I said, I picked Nasty Grind because I wanted to have a nasty grind sound. I knew it was going to work. The only thing I did was I changed the snare. Big deal. But yeah, I have to say that if only this kit existed when Metallica was recording Saint Anger, because at least the drums uh, might have sounded good. But we're sort of, water under that bridge, I guess, and we're sort of past that stage. So right now, Punk and Grind, the newest library from Ugritone, it's awesome. Grab it. You're gonna have a lot of fun with it, and it's easy to work with. So there you go. Link to this down in the description below. It is an affiliate link. However, Ron and the guys at Ugritone did not ask me to do this video. I'm doing this video because I want to. They have no idea I've done the video. I'll probably tell them I've done it when this has already come out. So all the opinions about this are totally my own. Just want to let you know. So yes, link below to this drum set. It is an affiliate link. I will get a little bit of the purchase. Help support me and the channel. I appreciate it, but Ron and the Ugritone guys, they have no idea I'm doing this video. So anyway, that's that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of the drums. Maybe post some examples if you're in my Discord, if you're in my courses and stuff, and let me know what you think. All right. So that'll do it. See you guys in the next video. Have a good one.